All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another round of Payoneer webinars on regulatory compliance for e-commerce in MENA. I'm both your host and your speaker for today's event. In today's event, we're going to be covering a number of topics related to regulatory compliance on e-commerce. So we would be covering compliances for sellers who want to register in MENA and sell internationally. Guidelines for what do e-commerce sellers have to do if they have to sell within MENA as well. And how can sellers from other international markets who have joined us today can sell in this geography. As we go along, we'll have our guest speakers, Mr. Arshad Gadit, Mr. Aamir, Saleem, and myself. I understand that this is a very complex topic and we'd love to have your questions. So while the webinar is on, we would request you to post as many questions in the chat as possible. And we'll at the end of the webinar, we have a 15 minutes Q&A session. We'd be happy to take as many questions as possible in that session. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Arshad Gadit, and over to you, Arshad.
Thank you very much, Shaival. Let me share the screen. Okay, so we hear a lot of things. E-commerce future is here. E-tailing has never been so exciting as we see it today. Both physical and digital worlds are converging, and whoever rides this wave will be the next leader in this space. Now, these encouraging statements you hear every other day, and nobody can deny the fact that some way or the other, any business in the planet will eventually have to digitalize, and e-commerce will be playing significant role as we go along. My name is Arshad Gadit, and I'm going to be talking you through the e-commerce play in MENA region. We'll give you some really great insight in terms of how the business of e-commerce is developing in this region compared to the other parts of the world, and how we are far behind or far ahead in certain areas. Also, I will be giving you a little bit more about the regulations, a wide variety of regulations. The regulations are evolving, and how can you sort of cope with the regulation, and not just cope, basically go above and beyond and participate and adopt and embed those regulations in your businesses for fostering the overall e-commerce industry. I'm joined with my dear colleague and friend Aamir. Aamir Saleem has been a e-commerce player for 2 decades. He has been working on 3 startups, successful, mashallah. And he will be sharing some stories as to how he has worked on e-commerce space, and that would be help for you as participants to know how he's juggled with regulations and other aspects of e-commerce business. I've got Shaival here. Shaival, you introduced me. I need to introduce you also a little bit. A high-powered organization, Payoneer, working shoulder to shoulder with the regulators and the market participants to ensure that the risk of payment in particular they are addressing. But this webinar is a testament that they just don't want to talk about payment. They want to talk about broader e-commerce regulation. And that is fantastic. So I'm delighted and pleased to be here and presenting a little bit more about me. 23 years of experience in professional services, working in 3 different continents. I have been I have advised more than 1,000+ clients in my life on different facets. So I'm talking about advising on e-commerce regulations, on regulations in general, assurance assistance, performance improvements, and also worked with a lot of regulators in the region and in the UK, working with setting up regulations, laws, guidelines, and then help them roll out in the industry also in different financial services and non-financial services spaces. So I've got good hands-on experience to talk about regulations. Also, I'm an e-commerce enthusiast myself. Recently, we've launched an e-commerce platform called prowireonline.com. We're trying to commoditize professional services. So far, it's working out really well. The idea is to create a level playing field for all the businesses, small, big, or large. So that is enough about me and the panel you've got in front of you. So let's start sort of talking about getting into the meaty part of the conversation. But just before that, so if you some housekeeping points. So if you can put 45 minutes, give your 45 minutes to your handset, mobile phone, just some rest. You will be getting a lot of information today. So you need to be all glued up to your screens. We will be parting a lot of information, and I would love to have an interactive session, a lot of questions. We can answer as many as we can. The variety of regulations is pretty large. You will know when I will start sort of diving into the details. So please try to put up all your questions as they come along, and I'll be more than happy to answer. Shaival and Aamir will be also chipping in as and when we go through. So what do we have as an e-commerce platform? What's the lay of the land today? A very large business is already being done online. So you are already participating in some shape or form in this overall play of e-commerce. I'm going to start with some basic information. I know some elementary level information will provide, and I'll notch it up because I know that there are different types of audience listening to us. Some are e-commerce enthusiast aspirants. They want to do something on e-commerce platform, and some are more mature and working in different jurisdictions already. So just to create a landscape, just to get a feeler of what are we talking about? What is e-commerce? So 2020-21, the ballpark number of e-commerce trade is around $4.2 trillion. And projected to be $10 trillion by 2024. These are damning numbers, and numbers are increasing, encouraging. MENA's share is not as big as what we thought that it should be, and given that we are now moving towards that direction, and I'll give you some really good statistics to talk about what exactly the MENA participants are doing. So it's around $8 billion trade happening. What's the contribution of the entire MENA region collectively and individually in the country wise? I'll tell you, and then we'll jump into the regulation part. Just to, you will be able to sort of correlate the two. MENA consumers are online. They are there. They have digitally converted. The internet penetration, the mobile penetration is really high. People want to shop online. 73% say that they want to shop online more since the pandemic. UAE comes out to at the top, saying at numbers of around $1,648 per person spent by UAE consumer. But then there are issues around it also. So the MENA shoppers are looking for safe and secure payment models, and more than 60% believe secure checkout is fundamental to a good online shopping experience. 68% of the consumer in Egypt and 67% of UAE customers also think that the materials which they are getting when they order something online, they are up to the mark, ethically sourced and recyclable. So in fact, just to get to the bottom, at a better quality, and then they are buying from a black box, so they should not get something what they did not order, compared to 50% benchmark globally. So these are good numbers, but there are some other facts associated with that. So I'm just going to correlate that with the information which I just shared. How GDP contribution of individual countries compared to UK, US, or China. So GDP contribution is high. Bahrain looks slightly higher because the population itself is not that big. It's 1.7 million population, but others are hovering around 5% of, and then some are below than that. So there's still a lot more room for it to foster, right, to grow. this is one of the very good insight in terms of how individual e-commerce penetration and retail industry is being penetrated. So in developed countries, UK, US are sitting at 15%, 12%, and China B2B, B2C is even beyond 20%. MENA, GCC, UAE, they're catching up, but they're far behind, and there is a reason for that. And regulation plays a big role in it. So I will tell you about it how. So a lot of e-commerce players want to do something. They have the desire to buy, but they're not transacting as much as they're supposed to. 22 people, 22 purchases happen by one person in China on average, whereas in UAE it's 3 to 4, and in Egypt is 1 to 2. So why is that? We need to just look into that as to why this is happening. There's a lot of study been done in this particular area. A lot of information has been thrown out as to what is the main reason why, with this growth rates which are being forecasted for all the regional players in terms of the e-commerce, what will facilitate this growth is the question. Based on our understanding, the work which we do with a number of clients, and the market research consultants like us do in the market, there are a lot of various reasons popping up. So Bain and Company has done a research in 2021, came up with a lot of different reasons, and the top-notch one was security of online payment. And that was the biggest issue for somebody to trust somebody. And this part of the world, MENA region, people want to keep the information close to their chests. What if I put my account code somewhere on a platform? What will the participants or the user will do with this information? Will my information be shared with others? Do I know what is going to happen? Who are these people? Why should I give this information out to somebody I don't know? And that's why in the MENA region, the reliance on larger players who are serving outside and mature players are doing more business, and a lot of imports are happening. So much so that it's going beyond 50% of the overall e-commerce space is imported business. People still have to build trust over the local platforms which are popping up. And one of the reasons is just that payment gateways which they're using, are they secure? Are they masking the information what they've been providing? And so on and so forth. But still, it's a cash on delivery kind of economy. People still feel secure. So I'll give you an example. 75% of population in UAE has a credit card. But the transaction level you have seen, they will do 60% of the overall online purchases are on cash on delivery. People are not feeling safe to buy things online. So it's just a matter of how you would encourage them. So I'll talk about that in a bit. The second and biggest issue which we have seen in the market, why people are not sort of doing as much as they should, is the reliability of the products they've ordered or services they thought that they are ordering, and there is no redress. So what I mean by that, so if I ordered a piece of cloth and I got something else, who do I go to? Where do I find recourse? What will happen with my refund? If the platform is not helping, where should I go? And these all issues stems from a lower level of confidence in the industry, and the level of consumption is lower. And the third, which I feel is relevant for the MENA region, there are a few more other areas, and if I were to start talking about it, I'll need a little bit more time. The other one is localization. So localization still to a large extent has not been adopted. So 71% of the platforms are still in English. And that's where, even if you put out all the terms and conditions in the world, giving us as much information as you want to, if it is not perceived or understood or interpreted right by the user of the platform, it will still create that gap which you're trying to fill in. So with these three major matters and other factors, so what are the government bodies are doing? What are the trade bodies are doing? The chambers are doing? The companies themselves are doing? A lot of regulations have been sort of worked through. And it's not started just today or yesterday. It has been worked through for quite some time since the e-commerce has started its play. A lot of regulations are there. 81% countries have got e-transaction laws. 59% of the countries have consumer protection law. 69% of the countries have privacy laws, and 80% of the countries have cybercrime laws. Now, this information is coming out from one of the UN subcommittees. We're trying to gather as much data as possible as to what laws and regulations are applied across the globe. Laws, having a law is one thing, and its enforceability is another. So the maturity of this enforceability is still under question. Some are very lenient, and some are very strict to the extent that they will not allow anybody to even do anything, and they will just break or penalize or completely shut down the businesses. And to a certain extent, they will allow businesses to foster and then just learn over the period of time. Now, one factor I would like to highlight here, that MENA has been playing a catch-up game in terms of regulations. And I'll show it to you when I compare US, UK, EU, and MENA region in terms of what regulations have been there. So you will see regulations are very fragmented, and they've been pieced out, unlike in the US, where it's all part of embedded in their normal commercial law. Regardless of whether you're doing an online business or an offline business, you would barely see a demarcation between the two. Yeah, there are some specific laws, but they are catered for both type of businesses, because the law, when they were written, they have been conceived as such that it will be applied to a wider pool of transactions. Unlike MENA, where they've been always very reactive in terms of the regulations. So cybercrime, something is happening, let's bring some cybercrime law. Or data protection is something which we are missing out, let's do data protection. Consumer rights are not sort of up to the mark, let's do something on the consumer protection. And they've been playing a catch-up game over the period of time. But at this stage, we're seeing consolidation of that. And one point I was about to highlight is the other parts of the world, mainly UK, US, they've got a very mature tax infrastructure already in place. So if they were to produce any kind of piece of legislation or regulation, it's for them, it's easy to throw it out to the middle and start its application widely faster. They've got a proper consultation process. There's debate, there brainstorms, there industry groups and forums which sit together, put their heads together, and then come up with a regulation. Here it's more incident based. So there's an incident, let's put out a regulation and then figure it out how to apply that regulation. So there's a challenge in between. But now, given this fast pace of the regulation changes, there's more regulation which are coming out. The tax infrastructure is building up, it's getting matured, and it is giving government bodies a wider access to the information pool, which they will help to for them to be able to craft the regulations, fit for purpose regulations. So in certain areas, you will see e-commerce regulations as widely. You've got Saudi, who have pulled out a full-blown e-commerce regulation where it talks about transactions. If you were to fail to do transactions, you ordered something you did not get, mis-selling of the products, everything is covered in that. And there's consumer rights, data protection also to a large extent covered. In certain parts of the MENA region, you will feel that the legislation is a bit loosely written. There's registration laws, there's e-commerce, particular e-commerce regulations in these countries which I've mentioned in MENA region. They've got data protection and cybersecurity laws in comparison to the US and UK, multiple laws, and I'll touch upon these in a bit. There's more laws, and they as I said, they're very fragmented. There's a pieced out for every single type of or multiple group of types of incidents as the market matured, and there's a consumer protection, online payment, and fintech regulation. So fintech regulation is an exciting one because there's this in MENA region, and globally also, innovation is something which the regulators are very flexible about. So if you come up with an idea and then you want to test it out, so there are testing labs in UAE. There's a sandbox in Bahrain, for example. You would be able to come and try it out, your product, in a live environment before you actually go live. And I've been part of a few of these products which have been tested, and how regulator is very flexible in understanding as to why when you're doing certain things in a certain manner. So these are the sort of laws and regulation in sort of broader terms. But if I were to sort of trickle it down to a transactional level, for example, so for example, I've written it down for myself to just to give you some kind of broadly sort of case studies or use cases. In terms of the transactions, one could arguably assume that they would have. And just one more thing I've written it down for myself is to highlight the maturity of the regulation is different in different countries. So, for example, in Libya, the regulations are either they non-existent or very light. And when you go to, for example, UAE, or Bahrain or Saudi, they are sort of leading the game, and front runners are having majority of the regulation which supposed to apply. How widely all-encompassing regulations those are, that's yet to be seen, or still they're working through them. They're not all encompassing, but they are there, and then they are being implemented. And one point I want to sort of highlight is these regulations, given the fact that I told you about the trust factor, you should be taking them as a booster to your business rather than a hindrance to your business. Because if that will build the confidence of the consumer, I would rather don't worry about the regulations which I need to comply with. I should just go to the best practice model globally and then try to see what can I apply on my business to build that kind of confidence to the market. So I should be ahead of a game with my peers and the competition. And that's the idea you should take away from this conversation. So I've written some examples. So for example, a company sitting in KSA selling products in Japan, or an individual in Pakistan trying to sell freelancing services in UAE, or a prop tech in Egypt selling properties in Egypt, a financial intermediary in US targeting clients in Bahrain. The typical questions I get asked, tell me what regulation I need to be worried about. I wish that would have worked the way I just described. Every situation is different. So I'll give you an example. In UAE, the registration concept in terms of what constitutes a business being carried out in UAE differs from other countries, perhaps. So for example, if you are sitting in US and you get approached by a UAE consumer, and then you're selling something. So for that company in US, the law of UAE would not deem you as having business in UAE because you're not soliciting the business. But if you're soliciting the business, so a US company trying to promote their product and finding intermediaries, and then effectively be seen in doing business in UAE, then they have to be commercially registered. Without that, it would be unlawful for them to be operating in UAE. And then Qatar follows the same thing, and other countries have got different stance when it comes to different kind of aspects of businesses. So with these 4 examples I've given you, it really depends on what kind of product you're selling, who you are selling it to, how you're selling it. Are you doing B2B, B2C, B2B to B2B to C, or C2C? it's just a wide array of things which you need to think about. But in a grand scheme of things, data protection, consumer rights needs to be, and cybersecurity, the information you're asking the consumer to share with you, how securely you're keeping it. That's the fundamental rule you need to always abide by. Some rules are very clear-cut, defined. You need to do A, B, C, and D, and some are just giving you an ambit of saying broadly you need to do certain things in a certain manner. But you need to first establish whether you've been seen doing a business in a country, and that stems well to the next point of VAT, for example. So VAT is applied in some part of GCC, and some countries in MENA region are fully tax regimes where tax is fully implemented. But from a VAT standpoint, when you think that you have a trade going on between a local company and an international company, does VAT apply on me, is a question I get a lot compared to other regulations. Because I said MENA region, from a regulation standpoint, like for example for PDPL in Bahrain, there's no regulatory, there's regulatory body, Ministry of Justice have been assigned to take care of it, but entire executive regulations are not out yet. So you would not know, if I were to comply with it, who do I need to report to? They've been worked through at the moment. Similarly for VAT, there is no way out. There's a law. You need to absolutely be crystal clear as to what you're doing when you're transacting in the country or out of the country. So you need to be mindful. So a rule of thumb I will give you. Of course, there's a lot more detail to VAT if I were to just dive into just VAT only. So B2C, B2B, B2B2C, D2C, and C2C and C2B, different facets, different ways of VAT law will apply. But as a thumb rule, I will give you this example on the right-hand side of the screen. So for example, if a country, for example, you're sitting in UAE, let's arguably take UAE as an example. So if you're sitting in UAE, selling a product online in UAE, straightforward, 5% VAT has to be applied. Thank you very much. Depending on what are you supplying, most of the stuff is 5%, but then wherever there is an exempt product which you're supplying online, you will have a 0%. But if UAE is selling something outside of UAE, say something is being sold to US, so 0 rating will apply as long as the conditions are met. My conditions can vary to multiple things, but the majority of the crux of it is that you would be able to prove that you have actually transferred the goods from here somewhere else. So you need to have your documentation right to prove that you can apply 0%. A country outside, so in US, trying to sell something to UAE, if it is a B2B and B2C, it would be same customs. So when I'm sitting in US, I will ship them to UAE without charging VAT, because that has nothing to do with me. VAT law applies in UAE. As soon as it hits the border, you will start consuming, go to the border, take the goods. The goods are actually, at that point in time, custom duties will be added, and then a VAT would be added when you're trying to take that goods from the customs or your logistic partners, whoever is the supplier in between. If you're using any intermediary also, that rule will apply. But it's a B2C and B2C, B2B is different. If it is a B2C, if it is an individual customer who are receiving in his own name, he will not be able to reclaim the tax. But if it is a company who is receiving it, he will be able to sort of put that into his returns and get an input tax charge claim back from the authorities, because it's part of the cycle of the trade. And ultimately, VAT is supposed to be charged to the end consumer. But if there's a trade of US sitting, you are here, but you're trying to sell something, for example, from US to China, and if you're in sitting in UAE doing that, most likely you're out of scope, not applicable, nothing will apply on you. But the trick is here that you need to be able to prove that the touch point has not been UAE. So the documentation again comes to picture. So the default position is you need to be able to prove that something is not vettable, then you need to prove that it's vettable. So if you know what I mean. So this is just in a grand scheme of things. I've given you a helicopter view of VAT and certain laws and regulations. Now, this might sound like too much to do, too much to handle, and there are too many regulations to abide by when depending on what type of trades you're doing. And one other thing which I will highlight. So a few things I have seen in people falling foul of. I had one client where they've started their project and selling something in Saudi. They've started working on their software. They've started working on their go-to-market strategy, started hiring people in anticipation that whatever they're building is usable for the market. And definitely, and I was sold on the idea that this will definitely sell. When I was engaged we were engaged to work with them, the few questions we asked, and then by the time they've spent a good amount of money actually to build up that platform. And I asked the question, so does that need a license by central bank in Saudi? And I said, yeah, it's fine. We can go then. And I'll just started sort of studying it a little bit more. And then we realized that just the deposit to do that business with central bank was 10 million riyals. And this was completely gone out of the shell because they have not planned for it at all. And that was just a deposit. Getting a license was another costly affair, and managing the license is all not straightforward when you're trying to get yourself to central bank regulations, because that comes with a full range of requirements, from corporate governance to consumer protection to risk functions, finance function. You need to have a proper org chart when you're building up a proper financial product. So if you have a financial product where you might think that it is not regulated, I'll give you another example. For example, if you are an insurance comparison website, and you will say, I'm just comparing, I'm not giving anybody any idea as to which insurance company to go with, you would be surprised that would need regulations in certain jurisdictions if you are doing that. So the central banks of all the countries are pretty equipped with these type of businesses. And then when you need to go and check with them through people like us, like consultants, or directly with their respective central banks, to ensure that you understand which regulations are required. Shaival, I'm on time, or okay. Great. So I've seen that there's 16 odd chat box and some questions have been floating in, and we will take these questions also. But that was in a nutshell for you, the e-commerce regulatory landscape. Of course, every single transaction is different, needs to be looked at differently, but I've told you some rule of thumb as to when you're getting into any space, any territory, any jurisdiction, you need to think whether you will be considered doing business in that country or you're not. And then that opens up the Pandora box of you required to comply with that laws of regulation of that land where you're trying to transact or not. So some top tips for the participants. These might sound very broad, but with the kind of mix of audience, I think that's the best way to do it. First of all, understand the product and the consumer, both locally and cross-border. You need to absolutely be clear who's going to buy stuff, and then whether that needs to be wrapped into certain kind of regulations. Research the market you're operating in and its related regulations. So any commercial legislation, cybersecurity legislations, data protection, consumer rights, VAT, and any other law, commercial registration laws needs to be understood properly before you go and enter into business. Of course, in this world of virtual sort of metaverse, blockchains, and NFTs are being sold across the globe, you need to be mindful of where your transactions are eventually ending. So that might trigger a regulation compliance in certain parts of the world. So in some businesses, for example, in VAT, have got hugely penalized for doing business in Saudi, for example. Lately, you've seen millions of dollars for large organizations. They thought that they are not under the umbrella of VAT, but they were. So check if your offering requires financial services regulatory licenses, be it insurance, asset managers. Within asset managers, you're advising somebody to buy some financial product, whether it's discretionary or you're just holding them their hands to ask them to invest in particular products or a particular fund, be it locally or internationally, needs financial regulations. Consult. So consult with friends, consult with the people you know, consult with consultants or the regulators. There's a lot more information online. So you just, if your research capabilities are good, you will not miss out anything. Local consultants definitely help. Law firms also always help. And then you need to always be mindful of the regulations where it is impacting the regulatory part of the business. And just don't think you and customer, also think your vendor. So the chain has to be complete, the full supply chain. So where is the vendor, where are you, and where is the consumer, and the financial impact of your services. Now at this current stage, the types of businesses we are indulging in, it's so broad that it's just difficult to bucket it in some shape. So you need to think broader than that. So just where your connection starts and where your connection finishes, and perhaps beyond also, the financial cascading effect of your particular advice to certain people, especially in the financial services regime, needs to be fairly considered. We as a firm have dealt with the number of companies coming up with issues. We were our startup advisory. So if somebody wants to start up something or already start up somewhere else, mature businesses starting in this region within MENA, we have a wide variety of things from a compliance standpoint, from legal registrations to actually taking them up to the licensing. We do our team for so-called venture builders and investor readiness. So we prepare people to be investor ready, take them out to investors also. And that's one subset of service we provide. E-commerce ecosystem built up advisory, and that has worked out really well for a number of e-commerce players who have been thinking of doing something or have done something, but don't know how to scale up. And what kind of organization they should become to manage that kind of traffic, for example, or the target market they're thinking of addressing. And the compliance health check was just like very laser sharp focus, just looking at the compliance health check, that whatever business you're doing, are you complying with all the requirements of the laws and the regulations of the country. So with that said, this is just a broad range of services we provide. I don't want to bore you with that, but just to give you a flavor that end-to-end services provide. So we understand the transaction flow of an organization from an accounting point of view to compliance. Whatever I said, I just need to sort of say it out as a representative of athGADLANG that this is based on my personal advice. It's not a company's advice. And all these regulations which I've listed out, they are prominent regulations, not all the regulations. So don't take any decision on the basis of this presentation. Take your own advice appropriately before you act upon anything which I just said. And I would love to answer any questions, but having seen all of this and understanding that there's a wide impact of regulations. So I'm going to pass on the baton to our friend Aamir, who's going to talk you through his journey of 3 startups, or I should say empires he's building. So Aamir, over to you to introduce yourself and what you've been doing, and bringing the context also what I said also in last 35 minutes, or shed some light, that would be great.
Great, Arshad. Thank you. These were some great insights. I think building blocks for any business in this region, right? So I think, Arshad, you've hit the head on the nail on many fronts, or nail on the head on many fronts. I think that flow of the things to do before you get started, that middle part, consult. I think that's my biggest learning. Having built 3 startups in this region, 2 of them are here on your screen. The previous one was ijaza.com that delivered a top line of around 450 million SAR in 2 years, operating out of Saudi. it's finding the right advice is key. I believe you might have the best idea, you might have a great team, but when it gets down to executing in this region, there are some blind sides here that you need the right advice to maneuver them. So thanks for that, Arshad. I think the information shared was spot on. Now, quickly about myself, my background, I've been in the tech, e-commerce, and travel business for the last 20 odd years. Currently, I'm a co-founder in these two startups. Eilago.com is a technology platform serving the travel consumers. And the goal there is to redefine travel and actually deliver personalization. And with COVID and the disruption that happened with travel, that was kind of, our call to action to look at the challenges of that this disruption has brought in the travel industry. And using partners like Payoneer, and how do we go about addressing the friction that had come about and the challenges, especially around payments and refunds, that were very pivotal in the past couple of years. So Eilago is a travel technology platform serving travel consumers. ProWire is a market network platform, and the goal of ProWire is to commoditize professional services. So when we say professional services, it's a combination of many things, right? Digital marketing, logo design, accounting, tax, legal, all that put together. And the end state we want to achieve is to create a level playing field for all the SMBs in the professional services space. And when I say SMBs, it's both freelancers and boutique agencies. And one key component of addressing the goals or visions of both these businesses is to ensure we have absolute payment efficacy for all participants in the ecosystems of these businesses. Let it be ourselves as business owners, our consumers, or our partners or our sellers on our platforms. So Arshad, if you can move to the next slide. And as we built these businesses, there are three areas around payments. So Arshad touched quite a few things around various regulation, but when it comes to a business leader, when I'm thinking I want to run my business, payment is pivotal. And Arshad spoke about the issue of trust, and the issue of trust around payment is actually the biggest problem that consumers face today. And I've tried to hopefully oversimplify the problem here. To me, payment has three aspects. There is the collection aspect, there is the processing aspect, and then there's the distribution aspect. From a collection standpoint, the biggest challenge for any merchant like us or any marketplace like us is we spend a lot of dollars to bring traffic on the platform. We create some exciting user experiences, but will the card be accepted when the time is to check out, right? So we spend a lot of energy and time ensuring that we broaden our ability to accept various kind of cards. But with that, inherently what comes is exposure to fraud. And that pushes back when you start putting in all these checks to prevent fraud. This in a way pushes back consumers. So you'll have to find this right balance where you ensure your acceptance of cards is growing, but also at the same time you are taking all the right decisions and you're putting in place the right infrastructure to prevent fraud. So when it comes to collection, we see these two areas pivotal to be addressed. Now we are a regional business. ProWire is currently a regional business. Eilago is becoming a region plus another region business. So when it comes to payment processing, one big challenge for us is currency management. So how do we collect from multiple countries and ensure we don't hedge ourselves too much against certain currencies and manage those currencies and the cash flow. So currency management takes a lot of effort to do it right. And especially in the case of ProWire, which is a marketplace, we handle the escrow of the payments that we collect. So and there again, the trust between the marketplace and the seller is paramount. We are using some technology today. We're building some technology in-house on blockchain around smart contracts to address trust through escrow. But that's another area in processing that we have focused on quite a bit. And then finally, distribution and settlement. Payoneer has been, how should I say, a godsend on that front. I'm not selling you guys here, Shaival. That's a fact. You as an e-commerce business, you have all kinds of sellers, right? Small, large sellers, small transactions, frequent transactions. So how do you manage that that volume and scale of work? And that's where you need mature solutions like Payoneer, and we have realized that. And then cross-border settlement, and that's another regulatory minefield. If you collect money somewhere, and if you're sending money somewhere, how do you address the whole challenge of that cash management? So, in a nutshell, both our businesses are addressing these challenges around collection, processing, and distribution. There are certain things that we have cracked, there are certain things that we're still cracking, but to achieve scale in e-commerce, it's paramount that you address these areas of payment and payment management. That's it from me. Shaival, over to you.
Thank you, Arshad and Aamir. There were some kind words and actually words of inspiration for all our listeners. I mean, if we were to look at the whole maze of regulatory arbitrage that is there in this geography, people might not even consider starting business. So thanks to you guys, it allows us to, take your expertise to our customers and our listeners. With that, having said that, I would like to quickly take the audience through what Payoneer does. Before I start, Arshad, if you could help me if my screen is fully visible, or Aamir. Yeah, all right, perfect. So starting off with just a brief about us. So we are typically, if you were to summarize what Payoneer does, we are a fast, flexible, and a secure and a low-cost cross-border solutions for businesses and professionals. So it is very imperative for people to know that we are only supporting business transactions, which could be done by both companies as well as individuals who work as professionals, such as consultants, contractors, freelancers, etc. Over the past 16 years, we've grown to almost 1,900 employees across 25 offices. We're growing, as you would all have known. Earlier this year, we went public on NASDAQ. We are a licensed company. We are licensed in almost all major financial hubs of the world, from an MSB US license in every state of the United States to licensing across every country in the Eurozone, UK, Australia, Singapore, Canada, you name it. Wherever we are not licensed ourselves, we worked with very reputed licensed banks, such as, I would not like to name those banks, but those are the most reputed banks that you would ever come across, and we work with them. Over the years, we have now increased our presence to, or we are servicing now almost 5 million customers channeling across $60 billion. Some facts about cross-border e-commerce. So why would someone want to focus on cross-border e-commerce? As Arshad also mentioned in his presentation, we are looking at a huge volume of e-commerce of around $4.2 trillion. Within this, if you look at cross-border e-commerce, there are almost 1 billion sellers doing that. We have seen through our payment data as well as across pool data that we've seen in our reports and through our consultants, is that a typical business, once has some kind of cross-border presence, grows more than 2x compared to a traditional trade or a traditional e-commerce. And with that, if you see the overall volumes of cross-border e-commerce represent almost 25% of the total e-commerce volume that are happening. And therefore, if you were to kind of summarize this, the overall growth rate across MENA region for cross-border e-commerce stands currently at 27%, e-commerce being one of our largest customer pool. We are just in a nutshell, what we offer is the ability to collect your funds globally and from all marketplaces worldwide. Needless to say, the ability is not only to collect but also to make payments. I would not spend more time on these slides. We're slightly over time. This is the kind of customer pool that we are catering to, from freelancers to content creators, online and e-commerce sellers, vacation rentals, digital marketing, and affiliate marketing. You see the names here are the top names. All of them are who we are integrated with. All in all, we are looking at almost 2,000 top marketplaces and digital platforms across various industries, which we service. This is a typical journey of what we saw with a large seller based in UAE. So over the past 2 years, from 2019 to 2021, the volume, so the seller all became a 6-figure Amazon seller at present. The biggest things that we offer to the seller are twofold: the ability to grow across markets with a typical single marketplace, and in parallel the ability to grow onto multiple marketplaces. So that is first. And second is the Payoneer virtual cart setup, which allows people to do the Amazon FB and Google ads seamlessly. So having said that, there are multiple other services that we offer. If you were to put what we have in readiness for MENA based sellers, like I said, the ability to consolidate your funds from anywhere in the world, sitting in your home country. You can do it at your single dashboard. You'll be able to then spend those funds using card, your own account. More than that, you'll be able to expand to other marketplaces, not only sell on one. And last but not the least, we are incorporated with a lot of tax agents as well, so you can directly pay your UK or EU taxes from Payoneer. You do not have to even withdraw it to your bank account. These are some of the key features. I'll very briefly take you through and then want to stop at the end of this slide. First is virtual receiving accounts. Very simply put, these are accounts that sitting in your home country. Once you form a Payoneer account, you get a bank account in top 10 currencies of the world through Payoneer, where your payers can pay you from anywhere in the world in those currencies. Then on top of those currencies, we have a global wire account wherein anyone from any country can pay you in US dollars. Following that, we are looking at a store manager. So once you're on Payoneer, like I said initially, you do not only have to sell on one Amazon store and then form a new account for each and every one. You can consolidate all your stores into one place. You can even consolidate all your marketplaces beyond Amazon or any other into one place over onto Payoneer. Again, like I mentioned, UK and EU VAT, you can directly pay VAT from your Payoneer account. If you have suppliers to pay in China, India, anywhere across the world, you can directly make a payment to their bank account or to their Payoneer account, whichever is feasible for you. We have a Payoneer card, which is a very brilliant product, which is offered in both physical as well as a virtual setup. Both cards are powered by MasterCard. So you'll be able to spend your balance directly from your Payoneer account without ever having to withdraw it to your bank account. Again, the previous one were the feature of the cards. This is talking about the digital purchasing card, which is the digital version of our card. Again, in this card product, we have fantastic payback, etc. We're happy to explain it to the audience, whoever is interested. There is a feature to manage currencies, which will allow you not only to basically get paid in one currency, but to then exchange it in the Payoneer ecosystem for almost close to free of cost, and then transfer it to wherever else it's required. And then so this is where I would like to point out, you have these marketplaces on the top where you're collecting all your funds. They come to your Payoneer account. Then you have 5 ways to distribute them. You can send it to another Payoneer account. You can send it to a bank account, and in certain cases, directly withdraw to e-wallets. More than that, there is a prepaid card, or there is a debit card now. It's not a prepaid card, which we explained to you. And last but not the least, you can withdraw it to your own bank account. So this is the crux. If I had gone too fast, I would like people to just stay and have a look at this slide and briefly explain to you how Payoneer works. So on the left side, you will see the ways with which you can collect, right? So there are various marketplaces that you can collect with, Amazon being one of them, multiple stores on Amazon. Payoneer is an exclusive payment player for eBay, so you can collect that. And like I said, 2,000 plus marketplaces worldwide. More than that, you'll be able to collect, if you're selling offline, in addition to online, you can collect your B2B funds by wire, by card, etc. And then directly also accept Stripe, PayPal, and other gateways. Once you have the funds with you, you can then, on the right side, you can see where you can make the payments to for various services, from Amazon and Google Ads to your logistic providers, paying VAT, or withdraw them to your account, or sell them to your supplier. It's a very quick refresher on Payoneer. Happy to take questions otherwise on in depth, because I'm assuming that a lot of people who are joining this would know typically about how Payoneer works. Otherwise, we're happy to address questions, and I'll be posting a query mail on the chat box for you to reach out to us. Thank you, everyone. And with that, we will move over to question answers. Allow me to just shut my screen for a second. All right. I think there were a few questions, Arshad. If I were to kind of mold them into one, there was one question which was talking about differences between if I'm an individual seller versus a company seller. What are my typical go-to or imperative licensing requirement? What can I do without, what I can't? Now, I think that's a very specific question, but if there is a broad answer to it, I think that would help people a lot.
Yeah, I think that the answer was part of my presentation also.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends whether you've been construed to having a business in country, regardless of who you are. So whether you're a customer, an individual, or you are acting on behalf of a company, or you are setting up a company and through the business through that, depending on whether you've been considered as doing business. So when you're actually doing business, when you start interacting with a larger pool of people. So for example, you go to a mall or any street, it's a street food which is sold, which is a pure C2C transaction. You will not see a VAT or any other regulations being applied. That company does not need to be considered to be in the limelight, or it needs to go through any kind of restrictions. So think like that also when you're going through the e-commerce platforms. What kind of audience you're dealing with? Is it something which you're soliciting to do bigger? So if you have a larger stall somewhere where you got attracting a lot of consumer, they would want you to be regulated. They want you to be so it will come the other way around. So customers, depending on how sizable you are, if you're just an individual trying to do something, you might not be required to follow any regulations. For example, if you're a freelancer sitting here in any country, like for example, it's sitting in Egypt trying to sell something in US on a C2C basis, nothing required. You just go out, sell your stuff, nothing. But if you want to start selling products for others, becoming an intermediary, taking it to a next level, trying goods, going from one side to the other, you need to start thinking about regulations, and because you're trading into a cross-border transactions. So it really depends. So I think answer may not be a very particular answer, but think from that context of a hawker. You are sitting on a street seller food, and then shopping center, and then beyond. I've seen one or two couple of other really good questions. So if I were to pick up Shaival, just one point, and maybe I think there's a question about the payment gateway, but I liked one of these points which was said about Souk.com and Amazon. When Souk was Souk and not Amazon, they were doing the service was much better than others. I think that's not a directly regulation point, but that tells you the point about localization, which I was saying. You're close to the heart of the audience you're dealing with. So when Souk was Souk, they were very close to the heart of people and understanding what exactly the demand side is. So the typical way of growth in this part of the world, Amazon sees that there's a lot of requirement from local seller buyers to acquire products from outside. Why don't I acquire somebody who's already dealing with services locally? When you actually start changing the management, that concept of understanding and closer to your customers is start diluting. And that's where, the success comes to those who continues to adopt to that. The local face and local understanding of the consumer is required. And one other point was mentioned about VAT, that whether VAT is required, you need to comply with the VAT requirements if you're importing something from somewhere, and if you're using as an intermediary, like custom clearance agent, would I be will I have to pay VAT, if I understood that question correctly? And the answer is that you imagine that anything hits the border coming in, you need to pay VAT through an intermediary or otherwise, depending on who the custom documents are in the name of. So if the custom documents are in name of you as a company or an individual, you are liable to pay tax. If you're using a clearing agent have licenses of different sort. There were two types of different licenses. They can actually clear on your behalf in your name, or clear on their behalf in their name, and then charge you back that VAT. So it depends, but then VAT have to be applied, be it through the intermediary or a clearing agent, or directly. So Shaival, I just stepped ahead and answered the questions, but please.
No, that was anyway my next question, and a couple of questions which I see here for Payoneer. Can Payoneer be integrated to Shopify? Yes, very straight answer. We'll be able to tell you more about how, if you can reach out to us. And the other question was around whether virtual cards work on AliExpress or not. Currently, at the moment, they do not. We are in the process of working and getting that up and running. So these, I think, were the two questions we got about Payoneer. One last question where probably it's open to both Aamir and Arshad is in terms of growing the e-commerce business, since both of you have seen it so closely, where do you see the easiest or the lowest hanging fruit for sellers based in, let's say, GCC? Is it selling internally to each within the MENA region or globally? Because I think the lowest hanging fruit would be selling to the West. But if one can probably get to the market right now, they would be the market leaders. So probably one last comment on this from both Arshad and Aamir, and then we'll close the event.
I'll go first, Arshad. Okay. I think, one theme throughout this event, I think all of us will appreciate, is trust, right? Now, there was time where consumers did not expect this region to deliver them quality, but that time has changed. Buyers increasingly are trusting local brands because they're here, they are reachable, the phone number works, they speak Arabic or other subcontinent languages. The product and services that businesses have built are comparable today to some of the best brands globally. So if you are a seller and you're looking for an audience, start around you, start in your home market, start in the region. From a consumer perspective, if they know they can reach you, if they know you can speak their own language, you've ticked the major, you've gotten rid of the major hurdles when it comes to building trust with consumers. Of course, invest what you can in your product, in your service offering, in the tech stack that you're using, depending on how you're selling, where you're selling. But start local, guys. That's the best foot forward, I would say.
And I would add that just be mindful of the blind spots. Regulation can be one of the blind spots in a wider sort of arena. A lot of things have been said, but I see a lot of people coming up and saying that I do not understand the law. Do I continue to trade into this particular area? don't worry about that. There are a lot of consultants and a lot of support out there which can help you out. So don't be afraid of it. And what I have seen in this part of the world, the regulations are very lenient. They will start becoming more compulsory for you as you go along. So just go with the flow, keep talking to people. You will be able to sort of get through it.
Perfect. Arshad, there seem to be a couple of last questions too, which is just added, as you must have also seen. It's around regarding VAT for services, not goods. And if there are companies from India working in Saudi, how do they address the VAT issue? So if you could just close on that note, we'll be amazing.
Yeah, I think we need to have a separate VAT session. So, and I can see that VAT is one of the regulations which are directly implicated through, because it's a part of the transaction itself. So perhaps take a note. We collectively decide whether we want to do a VAT session, and I'll bring the experts with me also, who talks about particularly about every single type of transaction within VAT regime when you talk about e-commerce as a whole. But same rules apply, services or goods, but goods don't enter the border. So how would you track that service is being delivered? So that's the question. So the whole VAT concept is self-assessment. Okay, so you need to assess whether you have imported services. Now it's very difficult from a C2C point of view. If I'm an individual trying to get or sell services, it's become difficult. But when I am a company and I'm receiving services or giving services cross-border, you need to have a mechanism in place for reverse charge, for example, when you think that the tax has been implicated. So reverse charge is a very defined concept. It's just that arbitrary. You will say that I have received and paid like a VAT. So that's a very crucial term which is used within the VAT arena. Companies from India working for services in Saudi needs to pay VAT for Saudi Arab. Now, whoever is at the receiving end of the service needs to make sure that they are they are complying with the VAT requirements. So where the services are enjoyed is where the tax needs to be paid. Okay. Now, so the company or an individual who is receiving the service needs to be mindful of when it comes to services. Services is a very difficult area depending on what kind of services you're talking about. So services also go down quite a lot of granularities. I think both related to the services part. Services is more difficult than the product. Product is pretty easy, crossing the border, you stop it, charge VAT on it. But when it comes to services, same logic applies. So both answers the same. You need to think what services you're receiving and whether it's a B2B transaction or a B2C transaction, and you act differently.
Perfect. Arshad, I think that it's been an awesome session. Thank you, Aamir and Arshad. I think there are multiple questions coming in. If people would, Arshad, if there is a central email ID which you could share over here for the audience, so that'll be great. For everyone, please feel free to reach out to this email and the specific questions like the one which came in from Muhammad Sami regarding the D2C brands, etc. Be happy to athGADLANG would be happy to take it and solve it for you. On that note, we would like to call it a wrap. Before everyone logs off, please, as you log off, you'll see a survey screen. Please let us know your feedback and help us become better for the next one. So once again, thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the speakers, and thank you to the audience as well. Have a pleasant evening. Bye-bye.
Very much.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.